Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories. We have stories that should thrill you a little and chill you a little.
It's amazing.
What you'll hear are adventures sent in by you guys, classic stories from the pulp mags, and episodes from the golden age of radio. We have special segments like Ghost Stories with Sylvia.
That's amazing.
And Paranormal Expeditions.
I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
So settle in for the next hour and enjoy the show. One more thing. You just might want to prepare yourself to be taken away from today.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by enigmatic points of view that lead to an inescapable truth.
Oh, I see.
Do you?
Yes, these FFM mysteries are hopelessly outdated and border on lunacy.
A bit more than I was going for, but accurate.
I tell you, Janice, it's got to be slick.
No, it won't work, Roger. It's too uncertain.
But there's nothing to go wrong. Now listen. Those custom boys are used to naive, stupid smuggling. We've got to be smart, that's all.
And you think your idea is?
Look, Janice, why isn't it? We get on the boat. We're strangers. We never speak to each other. No one on the boat can connect us in any way. Now, I get off first, and right away I have my trunk and bags examined. By the time I'm through, you're off and you're waiting. Then...
Yes, but that timing. How can I be sure there won't be a lot of people under letter G and only me at K?
For heaven's sake, Janice, you can stall somehow. We'll be near enough to each other to see how things are going.
Okay.
Then I pick up my 3 bags and walk over toward you. I'm clumsy and I don't see where I'm going. I bump into you, and as I do, you drop my wallet. I pick it up.
With your hands full of bags, I suppose.
Well, maybe you pick it up. We don't have to rehearse a scene like that. If anyone thinks he sees you drop it, my initials and identification will prove it's mine, especially as I've just been through the customs. It'll look as if I had it in my hand.
Sounds good, Roger.
Good, it's perfect. Why, with the diamond market the way it is, we'll clean up in America, honey.
Roger, if this works, you're a genius.
That all you want to declare, Mr. Griswold?
That's all.
You're clear then, Mr. Griswold. Guess you're glad to be home.
I certainly am. And more than you can guess.
Yeah, it must be pretty tough in Lisbon, even for Americans. Oh, can you manage that packing by yourself?
Oh, yes, thanks. I must be clumsy about this now. There's Janice, good girl. She's just arrived. Fine. Well, here we go.
Oh!
I beg your pardon.
Well, why don't you look where you're going? Oh, just a minute. I think you dropped this wallet.
What? Oh, yes. I guess I did. Oh, thanks very much.
Wait a minute there. He didn't drop that, miss. You did.
Oh, no, you're mistaken. That isn't my wallet.
Well, indeed it isn't.
I saw you drop it, miss. Say, what's going on here?
Oh, nothing's going on. This gentleman ran into me and dropped his wallet, and I picked it up, and that's all.
How do you know it's his wallet?
Because his initials are on it.
Oh, they are they? What are your names?
Janice Kite.
I'm Roger Griswold, but I don't
Well,
see...
Janice Kite and Roger Griswold, you're both under arrest for smuggling. How did the customs official discover their trick? In just a minute, we'll hear. First, a word from our sponsor.
Okay, I am reminded of the adage, the best laid plans of mice and men.
I am going to go with A Tale of Two Idiots.
Now that is funny.
No trained custom officer is going to fall for the dropped wallet gag. It's been done.
It has, and by some of the best. Take the Williams gang of 1832. They dropped a wallet while stealing Cocoa Puffs from a convenience store in New York.
Ron, that is just stupid.
But true.
No, it's not.
And now, back to our story.
Look here, you can't arrest me for smuggling.
Well, you remember I asked you, Miss Kite, how you knew it was his wallet that had dropped.
Yes.
You said you knew it was his because his initials were on it.
Well, aren't they?
Yes, his initials are there all right, but on the inside. And when the wallet dropped to the floor, it didn't fall open, so you couldn't have seen them. Therefore, I knew you had previous knowledge of them. Yes, you two had a nice little package of 15 diamonds in that wallet. And now, how about a free ride to the station house?
Oh my, the explanation is worse than the story.
I'm not so sure. The story was bloody awful.
It was, and the criminals idiots. I think we can label this one highly unsuccessful.
Or perhaps a completely aimless story with no mystery to it at all.
I like that better.
Who picks these silly things anyway?
That would be
me. What's that you say?
Hello, and welcome to the podcast. On today's show, we have something pretty cool. Ray Peyton is a longtime friend to the show, and we have 2 stories submitted by him to share. The first one is a brand new one titled Hardhats, Hurricanes, and Heroes. The second one is one that he submitted in 2015 titled Toy Soldiers. Also, we have a brand new These Are Your Stories segment where I take a look at your reactions to past stories. Now, we have a lot to do, so what do you say we get started? Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, computer, Kindle. Whatever you have, you can listen to Audible on it. So what am I listening to? The Iron Man Collection by Marvel Press and narrated by Will Dameron. So you've seen all 3 movies, but have you read the books? Well, here's your chance to hear the story of Iron Man from a completely different point of view. The novelization always offers scenes never filmed, or maybe filmed but never seen. Also, you can listen at your own pace and immerse yourself in the Marvel Universe. Now here's a clip from pretty early in the first book. Yes, I said first book. More about that later.
Tony watched as the bleak landscape of Afghanistan rushed past the Humvee's window. The vehicle was cramped, sweaty, and hot, a far cry from the air-conditioned luxury Tony had known all his life. He adjusted the collar of his expensive suit and glanced at the soldiers riding with him. None of them seemed bothered by the heat or the bumpy road. Buried under their gear, all 3 soldiers looked alike to Tony. "Oh, I get it," Tony said after a time. "You guys aren't allowed to talk. Is that it?" "No," Jimmy replied. "We're allowed to talk." The soldier whose name tag read Ramirez flashed Tony a beautiful smile. "I think these boys are just intimidated." Tony nearly jumped. "You're a woman," he blurted. The other soldiers chuckled. Tony's face reddened as he straightened up in his seat. "I would apologize for not realizing, but isn't that what we're fighting here for? The right of all people to be equal?" He smiled back at her, but Ramirez merely shook her head. "Mr. Stark, sir?" the recruit named Pratt asked. "Can I take a picture with you?" Tony looked at him seriously. "Are you aware that Native Americans believe photographs steal a little piece of your soul?" For a moment, Pratt looked worried. Then Tony added, "Not to worry, mine's long gone. Fire away." Grinning, Pratt crowded next to Tony as Jimmy framed them in a digital camera. Tony unbuckled his seatbelt and put his arm around Pratt's shoulder. "Say cheese," Jimmy said enthusiastically. Just then, a huge explosion rocked the truck. Tony watched through the windshield as an enormous ball of fire knocked the Humvee ahead of them off the dirt road. Tony slammed into the side of the Humvee. His gaze fell on the right side view mirror just as the Humvee behind them blew up. Trapped between two burning vehicles, Tony's Humvee skidded to a stop. The sound of gunfire rattled the Humvee's windows. At that moment, Tony regretted ever going to Afghanistan to promote his new weapons systems. "Stay here!" Pratt commanded. He, Ramirez, and Jimmy piled out of the Humvee, ready to fight. As they left, another explosion filled the air with dust. Tony peered out the window, trying to see what was happening. A face appeared on the other side of the glass. Lieutenant Colonel James Rhodes. "Get down, Tony!" Rhodey commanded. "Get—" A nearby explosion cut him off. Rhodey whirled, firing his machine gun through the dust. He ran into the billowing cloud, trying to secure the Humvee's position. As Tony ducked down, yet another explosion rocked the vehicle, shattering the window above his head. A shower of glass rained down on Tony's $200 haircut. The attackers, whoever they were, seemed to be getting closer with each shot. Tony knew he was doomed if he stayed in the Humvee, so he scrambled across the seat and out the far door. Tony stumbled across the rugged landscape, looking for cover. Smoke stung his eyes, and the sound of gunfire echoed in his head. The whole convoy had ground to a halt. They were trapped. Something landed nearby with a soft thud, an unexploded rocket-propelled grenade. Tony gaped at the info stenciled on the side of the explosive. USM 11676, Stark Munitions. The enemy was shooting at him with weapons made by his company. Tony turned and ran. Please let it be a dud, he thought. Please let it be. A blaze of blinding white light surrounded him as the grenade went off. The blast hurled Tony through the air, and he landed hard on the ground. The air rushed out of his lungs, and the world around him faded away.
Pretty good, wasn't it? But it doesn't stop there. This collection includes all 3 Iron Man novelizations in one volume. In Marvel's Iron Man, billionaire Tony Stark is kidnapped by terrorists intent on forcing him to build a weapon of mass destruction. Instead, he constructs an advanced suit of armor and makes a daring escape, vowing to protect the world from then on as Iron Man. In Marvel's Iron Man 2, everyone's favorite superhero, Tony Stark, returns with a brand new set of high-tech armor to save the world. This time, Stark takes on such vile villains as Whiplash and Justin Hammer to keep his technology safe. In Iron Man 3, fresh out of the events of the Avengers, Iron Man is plagued with worry and insomnia since saving New York from destruction. The Mandarin reduces his personal world to rubble, and Tony must avenge his losses and protect the people he loves as the invincible Iron Man. 3 great stories that normally would have been purchased separately, but Audible has put them together in one package. You can have it all for free. Here's what Audible has set up for us. They are offering a free audiobook in 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. This includes free access to the Audible Plus catalog, which is updated monthly with new titles. To download your free audiobook, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories, and you can get your free book today. Thank you, Audible. And now it's time for your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
Today we have a special These Are Your Stories. What we're going to do is look at a few reaction emails that I've received over the years. I get a lot of these, and I've been looking for a way to share them. Our first one comes from Brittany Long from Parts Unknown. She has titled it, "Please, Dad, leave the TV on." Hey, Ron, I love These Are Your Stories. No other podcast tells them like you do, and I hope you never stop. Every time I hear a good ghost stories, I'm reminded of when I was a kid. I was always such a scared child. My mother admits to this day she was a bit concerned about some of the things that I would tell her. Honestly, as an adult and thinking back, it would have scared the crap out of me. The first encounter I can remember was when I was about 5 years old. I was in the basement watching TV. I ran upstairs and was afraid of the dark and wanted the TV light to stay on while I went upstairs. My dad saw this and asked me to go turn the TV off before coming upstairs. This was obviously to save power, but as a kid it felt like it was my safety net. I went back down and turned the TV off and jetted back up the stairway. I got about 4 steps when I turned around and saw a black figure sitting on a tall table. Its legs were swinging back and forth, and its hand was motioning for me to come over to it. I turned around and ran the FK upstairs into my daddy's arms. I was screaming that someone was downstairs. Naturally, he said there wasn't, but I made him go look. Of course, he couldn't find anything. I still get chills thinking about that to this day. I will never forget it. Brittany Long from Parts Unknown. Well, Brittany, our childhood memories can define us, but they don't make us. Thank you for the nice comment about the podcast. I really do appreciate it. As for what you saw, man, I can only guess. But the fact that it made such an impression on you at 5 years old means you saw something. Thank you for sharing. Many of the stories we play on the podcast impact people. Sometimes it's with a memory that they have, or other times it helps them explain an experience. Such is the case with this next email. Ida Howell Michaels sent this in as in response to the Roosevelt Hotel story we had a couple weeks ago. Hello, Ron. Thank you for the podcast and solving a mystery I've had for years. I had a strange experience while staying at the Roosevelt Hotel. Yes, the very one you mentioned in the podcast. I was in L.A. for business, and it was the only place I could get a room for the weekend. What a grand place, and the food was amazing. However, that night I was awoken by trumpet music, exactly like described in your story. I kid you not. I even called down to the desk and got the same response as your storyteller. There was a jazz club at street level. I went down the next morning and found no such club, and have always wondered what I heard. I now know it was the ghost of Montgomery Clift, and that is so very cool. Ida Howell Michaels from Parts Unknown. Well, Ida, thank you for confirming that there really is something strange going on at the Roosevelt. I love it when we get someone sharing similar experiences and then am able to tie them together. That is so very cool. Animal stories are by far the rarest types of story that we get on the podcast, but for some reason they elicit the most response. Probably only second to Bigfoot stories. A few months ago, I had a series of cat tales that I tied together into one group. Shirley Medina was taken aback by them all and had this to share. Ron, you should do an animal-only stories podcast. I would love to hear you read them, and I surely do love cats. They are the most mystical creature on the planet, and I believe they're in tune with the universe. Terry Pratchett once said, "In ancient time, cats were worshipped as gods. They have not forgotten this." I have 2 cats, and there is no doubt that they are the rulers of my home. I believe that they allow me to live there just to serve them. Having said that, one morning I woke to a feline chorus. There's no better way to describe it. Miles and Miss Pink were singing together, and they were staring at the corner of the room. It was like they were being directed by some ghostly conductor. It was so very strange. They stopped after a minute or 2 and then went about their business. It was then that I slapped my head, kicking myself for not recording the event. So very odd it was, and it has never happened again. Shirley Medina, New York City. Okay, I can honestly say I've never heard anything like that before. Ever. I too wish that you would have recorded the event because it's so very hard to picture and quite frankly believe. Thank you for your email, Shirley. As I mentioned, Bigfoot stories that I read on the show are guaranteed to get a response from you guys. So many people see the big guy that there's no way that I can ever dismiss that Sasquatch isn't real. I have no idea what he is, or where he comes from, or why, but I do know that there is something to it. Just like there's something to the UFO phenomenon. Only time will tell. I got this email out of the blue, and I'm not sure what story Tammy Weber is referring to. Tammy didn't say where she hails from, but she did have this to say. Ron, Bigfoot is real. I've seen him, and once more, I've spoken to him. He is not the monster your story made him out to be. But I guess there are bad apples in every barrel. Just like humans, they probably make bad choices. My most recent sighting was while I was camping in the Olympic Forest west of Seattle. Many Sasquatch there, and if you're patient, they will speak to you. All you have to know is their language, which is show no fear and speak your heart. They will know your intention and respond in kind. I asked them to show themselves, and a small one did. She was about 6 feet tall, and I'm pretty sure she smiled at me before running off into the forest. Tammy Weber from Parts Unknown. Maybe Washington? Well, Tammy, I'm not sure how I feel about your comments, but your attitude does make good sense. I would love to hear more of your stories and encounters with the big guy. It sounds like you just might have a few. Thank you for sharing. Well, that's it for this time. If you have a story that you would like to share, like Tammy did, head to the main website at ronsamazingstories.com and click on the story submission banner. Leave your story, give it a title, and tell me where you're from. I'll read it if I can.
As read by Amazing Stories, read by amazing people.
This time on As Read By, we have a pretty amazing story sent in by a pretty amazing guy. Ray Peyton has been listening to the podcast since at least 2015 and maybe even before that. He has sent in stories, been interviewed on the show, and has been a loyal member of Ron's Amazing Stories family for a really long time. I can't tell you what that means to me. Just the other day, Ray sent in another of his stories that he calls Adventures of an Oilman in Louisiana for us to hear. This one is titled Hardhats, Hurricanes, and Heroes. It was written by Ray, but is going to be read for us by our very good friend, Mark Nelson. Mark works for Audible and is a talented narrator. I think you're going to like this one.
September 7th and 8th, 1974. Hurricane Carmen made landfall just east of Vermilion Bay. Winds at a Bayou Boeuf oil rig topped 110 miles per hour, with gusts to 120 miles per hour. The storm killed 3 and caused $150 million in damage. The date was September 7th, 1974. I was working the night shift at Frank's casing crew in Lafayette, Louisiana, and Hurricane Carmen was headed my way. I didn't know it at the time, but Lady Carmen and I would get up close and personal. As a matter of fact, before the night was over, she would kick my butt, and I would never forget her. Before I continue on with the story, let me offer the reader a little background information, set the stage, so to speak, so you will have a clear understanding of what happened that fateful September night when Hurricane Carmen bullied her way through Vermilion Bay, made landfall in south-central Louisiana, and destroyed every stalk of sugar cane in her path. Frank's casing crew hired me on December 4th, 1971. I played hooky to get the job, and my mother had to sign a miner's release. I was barely 17 years old and halfway through my senior year at Como High School in Lafayette, Louisiana. I was hired as a shop hand and worked nights on weekdays and all day on Saturdays. If I was called on Sunday for a special project, for instance, painting pipe or loading tools, I had to go. My starting pay was $1.65 an hour. My first paycheck in January 1972, I got a 20-cent an hour raise. I got the big head and thought, damn, I must be doing a good job. I've been here 3 weeks and already got a raise. My ego was slightly deflated when I passed an official notice tacked to the bulletin board at work, advising all employees that as of January 1, 1972, federal minimum wage had been increased to $1.85 an hour. I was a shop hand. My various duties included washing company cars, sweeping the floor, driving a forklift, cleaning and painting Frank's equipment, loading said equipment onto trucks, unloading dirty equipment off of trucks, and I was the company nighttime gopher. I loved that part of the job. The dispatcher, Mr. Bill Gerald, a weekend warrior Marine Reserve, would send me on missions. He would send me to bars on Moss Street to pick up drunk crew pushers, take injured hands to the hospital, bring prescription medicine to docks because casing hands forgot to refill their meds and were now 100 miles offshore on a drilling rig in the Gulf of Mexico. These are just a few examples. It would get me out of the shop. For example, if it took an hour to drive to a dock intracoastal city and drop off a spare tire, it might take me 2 hours to get back. So, on Saturday, September 7th, 1974, I was working the night shift at Frank's in Lafayette. I had punched in around 4 or 5 p.m., when everyone on the day crew was punching out. Hurricane Carmen was pitching a fit just a few miles from the Louisiana coastline. No one knew where it was going to come ashore. The residents of Biloxi, Mississippi were hauling north. Many had learned their lesson 5 years earlier in 1969, when Hurricane Camille slammed into their beachfront and took 143 lives with it. The citizens of Cameron, Louisiana, didn't hang around town either. Many could remember the devastation of Hurricane Audrey in 1957, where over 300 people perished. However, on the evening of September 7, 1974, Carmen was headed straight for New Orleans, and she was not a lady. Voodoo queen, maybe, because she had all of the power and everyone was looking at her. In Lafayette, it was raining and the wind was picking up. There was just 3 of us at the shop, the dispatcher Bill, a fellow shop hand, Wilbert Turpo, and myself. I was counting on some easy hours that night. We were going to batten down the hatches and ride the storm out. I was dead wrong. One phone call changed the entire situation. Around about 7 p.m., a company man on a Grey Wolf drilling rig outside of Scott, Louisiana, called Frank's for a welder. It was not hard to believe at the time, but it was hard to believe now. I don't remember what he needed him for. That didn't matter so much. Bill Gerald called every offshore welder we had to go on this job, and every offshore welder we had told him, "Are you crazy? I ain't going." Finally, after being turned down by every welder on 24-hour call, Bill called one of our shop welders, Aaron Thibodeau. Aaron didn't normally go on jobs. He had done all that kind of work for 20 years, and now he just worked in the shop, regular hours, no 24-hour call. But when Bill called him, Aaron said he would go. However, Aaron could not read or write. Illiteracy was not uncommon among men in the oil field in 1974. He could not follow the written directions to this location. Aaron could not fill out a ticket book. Aaron insisted on someone to lead him there, and I was elected. At the time, just after dark, Hurricane Carmen was still churning up Gulf waters due south of Grand Isle, Louisiana, headed north, and not a one of us was intelligent enough to be concerned. We were helping out a customer, and I was getting out of the shop. Aaron pulled up the welding truck to the gas pump, and I grabbed the keys to the newest Ford LTD Franks owned. At about 8:30 p.m., we left Frank's and took off down Highway 90, the old Santa Fe Trail, towards a Grey Wolf drilling rig in Scott, Louisiana, with the wind and the rain. We passed Baker Oil Tools on the left and Sunbeam Bakery on the right. We drove on towards our destination through a dark, stormy night. Aaron and I had the whole highway to ourselves, except for the occasional police car and emergency vehicle. Most everyone else was smarter than us and stayed off the road. Somewhere between Scott and Doosan, I spotted the Grey Wolf rig sign and turned left on a gravel road. I could see the derrick illuminated in the distance, towering brilliantly through the sky. We followed this road through ever-increasing torrents of rain, with our windshield wipers on high, doing our best to keep our vehicles between the ditches, finally turning again to our left on a board road which led us to the location. The rain and wind had picked up considerably as I slid the car into the location about 9:30. We made it. Mission accomplished. I turned the LTD around and pulled up alongside Aaron, my driver's side window to his, and told him, "Thanks, Aaron. Goodbye." My mission was accomplished, and I left the location, heading back towards the shop, via Hugh Wallace Road, hoping my favorite bar, the Robin Hood Lounge, was still open and loaded with friends. Yep, I was 19 years old, 10 feet tall and bulletproof, and headed to a hurricane party. I was heading home. At 10 p.m., Hurricane Carmen abruptly turned from a northerly direction to the northwest and entered Vermilion Bay, due south of Lafayette. I don't remember driving back down that board road, but I'll never forget turning right onto the gravel road exiting the location. By then, weather conditions were severe. Raining cats and dogs was an understatement. The wind? Gale force winds pretty much nails it. The heavens had opened up, and torrential rain was hitting me and my LTD at a 45-degree angle. Drainage ditches followed each side of the road. In South Louisiana, we called them coulees. A coulee is pretty much defined as a stream smaller than a creek but larger than a ditch. My immediate goal was to keep the car between the ditches, and I soon found this endeavor going to be impossible to negotiate. My car kept veering to the right, even though I was steering to the left. My rear tires seemed to have a mind of their own. They refused to follow along with the front tires. So I finally just put on the brakes and stopped the damn car. It was then the wind blew me into the right-hand coulee. The first thing I thought was, "Oh, crap, I sunk Frank's new car." I had put their brand-new crew car in a coulee that was quickly filling up with water. The car was sitting lengthways, leaning at a 45-degree angle. The passenger side was submerged in Hurricane Carmen's cast-off. Somehow, I managed to push open the driver's side door and crawl out of the car. Car doors are really heavy when the car's leaning the wrong way. When you finally do get out and let the door go, it slams shut. Like wham! Especially in a hurricane. I think it's the extra dynamics involved. It's a physics thing. Wham! So there I was, climbing out of a ditch, and Carmen was coming ashore. I could feel the rain pounding my back, the wind trying to blow me off my feet. I could hear the violence of the storm. I could see my young career flowing madly down a drainage ditch. I could taste the flavor of fear and smell immediate trouble. So I had a decision to make, easy enough to make. I walked away from the car and back down the gravel road towards the rig, fighting, stumbling, and leaning against the wind, desperate to stay on my feet. I had a round blue plastic hard hat. The wind took it off my head. The hat soared through the air like a frisbee, landing smoothly a quarter-mile down the board road. I was drenched and walked on towards the hard hat and hoping it would not become airborne again. Finally, I reached it, and it was stuck on a nail, where it had landed. I picked it up and put it back on my head. Looking back years later, I truly believe God took that hard hat off my head and blew it in a straight line to the end of the board road to the edge of the rig location to give me an objective, something to keep my eyes on. At the time, I just wanted my hard hat back. He wanted me to live through the night. When I finally made it to the rig, I walked into the company man's trailer. My hair was long back then. I told him what had happened and asked if I could use his phone to call the shop. He called Frank's for me and said, "Hey, I got this hippie in my office that needs to talk to you." What a jerk! I remember it pissing me off to no end. Here was a man who had called my company for a welder in the middle of a storm. We had literally risked our lives to honor his request. He was an old dinosaur. Now he was talking to me like I was a piece of crap. He reminded me of a man that would call for a welder in the middle of a storm, a self-serving son of a gun. It wasn't so much that he had called me a hippie. It was the way he said it that offended me. Anyway, he handed me the phone. On the other was Bill Gerald, our dispatcher. I told him I had put the company car in a ditch and needed a winch truck to get it pulled out. He never wavered for a second and said he would send Wilbur to come get me. I said, "Send him to the rig. I'll wait on him here." I walked out of the trailer and headed to the doghouse as the storm raged on. I sat there next to an open door, so that when Wilbur pulled on to location, I would see him. It would have been better to close the door, but I would have been isolated. It was no time to waste time. Now, you may be saying, no way. Yes way. The hurricane had not hit Lafayette yet. It did not make landfall until 7 a.m. the next morning. Try to imagine the worst thunderstorm you have ever been in. Wind, pouring rain. Mother Nature was raising Cain, letting everyone know she was on her way. I was young, dumb, 10 feet tall, and bulletproof. I was not worried about my own safety. I was worried about that damn car. I had to get it out or Franks was going to run me through the meat grinder, and I knew it. I waited on Wilbur, hoping he did not get blown off the road before he got to me. Maybe it is a good point in this story to introduce you to Wilbur. We were not only co-workers, we were friends. I was 19, Wilbur was 50. He was strong, tough, good, and a hard worker. We both worked nights together. We unloaded tools, cleaned tools, painted tools, loaded tools, swept the shop, cleaned fish, and shot the breeze. We had a bond. He had my back, I had his. To a big extent, we were two different cultures intermeshing, some things in common, some not. I was a redneck Baptist from North Louisiana. Wilbur was a black Creole Catholic from Acadiana. He was from one side of the tracks, I was from the other, but fortunately, we rode the same train. We were tight. I knew he would come get me, and he did. I sat there in the doghouse on a bench, amidst steel-toed boots, hard hats, dirty old coveralls, breathing in the smell of diesel. Rain poured in through the open doghouse door as I looked hopefully for Wilbur's headlights. He was my only hope. I became impatient. The car was not really far from the rig location, only about 200 yards from the end of the board road, so I said, "Screw it, I'm going back." So I braved the storm and trudged back to the car again, with my round plastic hard hat shoved way down on my head and my eyes looking down on my feet. And as I made it back to the car, the bright headlights of a Frank's Casing Crew flatbed gin pole truck lit me up and saved my butt. It was Wilbur Turpo, my friend, coming to my rescue in a big old heavy bobtail truck equipped with a winch line. What a hero he was. The old bobtail he was driving had dual mud-grip tires on the rear. Wilbur drove down the gravel in second gear. I believe my heart skipped a beat. We were on a wide gravel road, and Wilbur was able to turn the truck around and back the bobtail up as close as he could to the LTD. It was raining cats and dogs. I climbed onto the bed of the truck as Wilbur engaged the winch line. I pulled the steel cable out over the rear roller, jumped off the truck, and kept pulling until I had a little more cable than it took to reach the car. Wilbur put the winch line in neutral, applied the parking brakes, and jumped down out of the truck. We could hardly hear each other, but it was obvious I was going to have to get down in that coulee again and hook the cable to some point underneath the front of the car. The storm raged on. The water kept rising as I climbed down in the ditch with the cable. Water raced by waist high. With hook in hand, I ducked under the front bumper, for a moment completely submerged, and found a place underneath the car to hook up the cable. Once the line was secured, I struggled out, pulling the cable towards myself and up the bank to solid ground, where Wilbur, having exited the truck, met me. The car was leaning at a 45-degree angle. I pulled open the driver's side door, which weighed heavily, and as Wilbur held it open, I climbed back into the car. Wilbur then let go of the door. It slammed shut, wham, as he headed back to his truck and engaged the winch. As he pulled in on the line, I turned the steering wheel as far to the left as I could, and the 1-inch steel cable pulled me up and out of the coulee. I turned the key, and to my amazement, the engine fired up and I shifted into neutral. We did not disconnect the winch line from the LTD, and Wilbur pulled me through the raging wind and pouring rain to the end of the gravel road. At that point, we disconnected the line, and with windshield wipers turned to full blast, we continued on down Highway 90, the old Spanish Trail. We had the whole road to ourselves again. No one else was that stupid. I followed closely behind the bobtail truck and used it as a shield against the oncoming wind. Slowly but surely, we crept along down Highway 90, sometimes referred to as Blood Alley, in forward and through the pouring rain. I was following the ditch and Wilbur's taillights, not too close, not too far. I was thanking God for sending Wilbur to my rescue and praying he would get us safely back to the shop. It's funny. At the young age of 19, I was still more concerned about the company car than ourselves. Finally, we turned right off Highway 90 onto Vero School Road, up and over the railroad tracks, and left into Frank's Casing Crew's parking lot. We made it. I drove straight to the wash bay at the rear of the shop. Wilbur parked the bobtail and met me there. Thick mud covered the bottom half of the car. It was in the wheel wells, inside the floor mats, on the steering wheel, and caked to front and back bumpers and undercarriage. The first thing we did was to fire up the gas-powered industrial-strength steam cleaner. A high-pressure stream of boiling water knocked off every bit of mud visible to the naked eye. We threw all 4 floor mats onto the shop floor and beat the mud out of them with water. We vacuumed the seats and washed the windshield to sparkling clean, as all the time the hurricane approached and it was storming outside. Once we had cleaned the car to our satisfaction, it was about 4 a.m., and we parked it back on the line with the rest of Frank's cars. I had already been at work about 12 hours. I was tired, but I was also young and on overtime. We were trapped at the shop. There was no way to leave and head home, considering these potentially deadly weather conditions. I mean, who would want to get caught in a hurricane? Carmen made landfall and tore a path straight up the Vermilion River. By 9 a.m. on September 8, 1974, Carmen had already passed over south-central Louisiana. Our day crew began showing up at the shop. Just when the weather has cleared up enough for Wilbur and I to climb in our cars and head home, Leroy, our daytime dispatcher's voice, boomed over the outdoor speakers, ordering all employees to report to the coffee room. Once gathered in the break room, he informed us that during the hurricane, a tree had fallen on the roof of Donald Mosing's house. Don was Frank Mosing's oldest son, the vice president of Frank's, and the man who had hired me. Don had given orders for every hand at the shop to report to his house immediately. I can remember being on the roof of his house, him and me cutting up the limbs of the fallen tree and throwing logs off the side of his house. He slapped me on my back and said, "Good job, Ray." I couldn't help but think to myself, if you only knew what I did to your car last night, Mr. Donald.
First, let me say, what a great story. It really gave me the feel of what it must have been like working in the oil rigs of the 70s, and all from the eyes of a lad destined to have many adventures. Ray, you are one of a kind, and please keep sending in these stories as long as you're able. I, for one, want to hear more. The reader for our story was Mark Nelson. Mark did the narration for this one, and I think he did a pretty darn good job. Mark has recorded more than 70 professional audiobooks, including crime fiction, science fiction, horror, nonfiction, histories, and classics for Audible. He has also made over 150 recordings for LibriVox.org, which is amazing. You can find out more about Mark and his work at markdouglasnelson.com. I'll have a link to it in the show notes. Are you ready for another story? This one is being brought to us by Gladys Goodies. Good treats for your dog to eat. They use all natural products with no sugar, preservatives, salts, or harmful ingredients. So check out their online store at GladysGoodies.com. That is GladysGoodies.com. And don't forget to use our very own promo code, RONS, to get a 20% discount on all of your purchases. That is RONS. Thank you, Gladys. For our featured story this week, you have to set the Wayback Machine to May 12th, 2015. At the time, I was just starting to ask for your stories. Not just your experiences, but I also wanted your fictional ones. Just a few minutes ago, we heard a story sent in by Ray Peyton about Hurricane Carmen. Well, this was not Ray's first story on the show. For that, you have to go back to episode number 201, Toy Soldiers. In that episode, Ray not only told the story that you're about to hear, but went into detail on where, when, why it was written. The place was in Iraq. The when was in 2011. He was stationed there as a contractor. The why is a bit more complicated and will be easier to explain after you hear the story. So, here is Toy Soldier, written by Ray Peyton. Toy Soldiers by Mr. Ray Peyton. Billy wanted a toy army camp for Christmas. He had seen one at the dime store in town. It was all set up on display. The camp came with plastic tents, toy soldiers, tanks, jeeps, artillery, cannons, 2 helicopters, trees, bushes, and an American flag. It was $7.98, and since it was already December, he made his decision quickly. Billy usually got one thing he wanted each Christmas, and this year he would ask his mama for an army camp. Billy approached his mother as she stood hanging her wash on the clothesline in the backyard and said, "Mama, can I have a toy army camp this Christmas? They have one down at Morgan and Lindsay." His mother looked down at her son and said, "An army camp?" Billy replied, "Yeah, Mama, it comes in a big cardboard box and is only $8. His mother said, $8, as if it were a ton of money, and Billy said, "Yeah, $8. Go ask your father, and if he doesn't mind, I'm okay with it." Billy didn't like this reply very much at all. He had not wanted to ask his dad. He wasn't sure why. He just didn't want to ask him. His father had been home 18 years from World War II, and many people said he was a genuine war hero. His daddy had lost his right leg just below the knee in some famous battle called Bulge. There was even a plaque down at the War Memorial Building with engravings of his father and other men's names. Billy actually believed his father's heart was purple and wondered what colors his own really was. His father would never talk about the war, though. That subject was off limits. Now he mainly just sat around the house, watched TV, went downtown to the pool hall, and hunted during deer season. But Billy wanted that army camp desperately. He reluctantly walked into the house and slowly entered the living room. His dad said, "Hey, boy, go change the TV to Channel 3, will you?" "Sure, Daddy." Billy walked across the room, dodging a beer can that had been set on the floor by the couch. "Hey, Daddy, may I ask you something?" His father was focused on the football game, looking for Bart Starr to throw a touchdown pass. "Get out in front of the TV set, boy. You're a pain, but not a window pane." Billy moved fast. Okay. I just wanted to know if I could have a plastic army camp for Christmas. The one I want is down at the dime store, and it's only $7.98. Mama said I had to ask you. His father replied, "What the hell do you want some old toy army camp for?" Billy said, "'Cause I think it's really neat, Daddy. I want it bad. You were in the army, and I want to be a soldier too, just like you were." "Boy, you don't know crap about being a soldier, and you don't want to be one. War is bad, real bad. You just don't know. It's not a game, son." "Yes, I do want to be a soldier, Daddy. I really do," Billy said. His father replied, "Son, listen. Stay in school, make good grades, and I'll send you to college when you finish high school. That's your best bet. Listen to your old papa this time." "I still want the army camp," said Billy intensely. His father leaned backwards, drank a long sip of beer, and stared at Billy for half a minute. "Okay, son, we'll see. Now, go back outside and play." Billy left the room with his fingers crossed. He really wasn't sure if he would get the camp or not, but there was hope. Christmas rolled around and it was cold. There was snow on the ground. The fire roared and smoke billowed out of the chimney of the old wood frame house. The family had a little pine tree in the living room decorated with ornaments and strings of popcorn. Billy had gone into the woods, cut down the tree with a hatchet, and dragged it home. Under the tree this Christmas morning was his army camp. Billy had never been so excited to see a cardboard box. There it sat, wrapped in plastic, with a picture of a real army tank on the top. Mama was home, but Daddy wasn't. Billy told his mother thank you about 5 times while he tore into the box. He spent the next 2 hours unpacking it and setting up the camp. The box included 8 illustrations showing different ways to lay it out, and Billy borrowed an idea from each. He wanted his own design. He got down on the middle of the living room floor and laid out the tents, the tanks, the cannons, the whirly-birds, and the toy soldiers until he had them all in place. The camp was just like he wanted, just like he had envisioned just days before. He was now ready for an enemy attack. About 10 o'clock in the morning, Daddy returned from the local bar and grill. He was wearing his old sport coat, grinning from ear to ear and smelling of whiskey. He walked into the living room and said, "Hi, Billy. Merry Christmas. I see you got your army camp." "Yes, sir, Daddy, and I thank you very much. I sure appreciate it." "No problem," he slurred, and reached into the pocket of his sport coat, the same pocket where he kept his loaded .38 Special. He pulled out a big red cherry bomb with a long green fuse and lit it with his Zippo. Billy's eyes got wide as his father tossed the cherry bomb into the middle of the army camp. Billy scooted backwards quickly towards the end of the couch. The fuse burned brightly, and his father laughed long and hard. The cherry bomb went off. It sounded just like Daddy's high-powered hunting rifle being fired, but louder. The window panes of the house shook. Mauled and mutilated toy soldiers flew in every direction and ricocheted off the walls. Airborne tanks turned from green to black. Jeep cut somersaults across the floor. The blast knocked the plastic wheels off the cannons and blew blades off the helicopters. A plastic projectile knocked the Angel from her perch atop the little pine tree, and she fell headfirst into a string of popcorn and just swung there. Smoke burned Billy's nose. His camp destroyed, blown to kingdom come. The American flag still waved all the way across the hall in the dining room. Billy, in shock, his ears ringing, looked down at the wreckage on the floor. A few toy soldiers lay there, some missing arms and legs, some their heads laid alone. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He couldn't believe that his camp was gone and how quickly it disappeared. He would never be able to put all the pieces together again. From the doorway, his father was still laughing, popped the top on another beer, turned, and walked out of the room. That story, while cruel, is wonderful at the same time. Ray told me that it was based on what his friend Mike told him in the early 70s. Mike worked with Ray at Frank's casing crew, which you heard about in our first story. As I said, Ray wrote it while in Iraq in 2011. While Ray had some time off, he decided to finally get the story that his friend had told him on paper. While writing it, the base came under fire and friends of his were killed. Because of that, this story has always had a special place in his heart, and I'm happy to bring it back and play it for you today. If you want to hear the interview I had with Ray in episode number 201, I'll have a link to it in the show notes. It's well worth a listen. Ray also told us another story about a helicopter crash that was in episode number 346. It was titled, Ditching a Helicopter in Water. To Ray, I say thank you for your support of the podcast, and most of all, for sharing your stories. That was episode number 509, and these are the people in your neighborhood. Brittany Long, Ida Howell-Michaels, Shirley Medina, and Tammy Weber. Thank you for the great submissions. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find any of the links I mentioned and how to contact us. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends all about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. Clicking that follow or like button makes us grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.